If you could eat anything for breakfast, what would it be?
This morning, I was craving the chocolate chip pancakes or waffles that you used to make us on Saturday mornings.
I would make them in the Death Star. Is that the best way to do it?
Hello and welcome to the Resilient Lineage podcast, where we reflect on the past, anticipate the future, and discover what God is up to today. I'm Olivia.
And I'm Milo. And we had a tradition on Saturdays when you guys were little that I would make you pancakes or waffles on Saturday morning, let your mom sleep in, so I cover down on breakfast. And one year I got a Star Wars
pancake
waffle maker. It's kind of like thin waffles, closer to pancakes. And so as a result, that's what we would have for a while.
Before that, it was the Mickey Mouse one.
Oh, it was. Yeah, we had the Mickey Mouse one.
That one broke.
Yeah, broke, and then we got the Death Star one. Which of those two did you prefer?
The Mickey Mouse one were a bit fluffier. I feel like the Death Star feel like a mix between a pancake and a waffle and a crepe.
Oh, yeah.
It's like thin, but like super detailed.
Yeah.
They're in the It's like they're in the shape of a pancake, but got like the holes like a waffle.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay. Well,
that's exactly what we're talking about today.
Well, in a lot of ways, it kind of is, because we're going to talk about focus.
Focus.
Like when you woke up thinking about that.
Yeah.
It's kind of one of those when you wake up thinking about something that you want, how it doesn't, it kind of sets the expectations for the day. It's interesting. This morning, I woke up at 5 o'clock, and there's something, I won't go into details, but there's something I've been thinking about for like the last 3 to 4 months. And I've been kind of mulling it over and doing some observation and paying attention to some things. And I woke up at 5 with like this burning desire of, you need to take action on what your thought is. And so, I got up, I drafted a message to the person who I felt needed, that I thought was the best point of contact for that message. And I sent them the message, and this is to like a very, I won't go into the details of what it is, but to a very public-facing organization. And has nothing to do with my job as a Navy chaplain or anything, that kind of stuff. But I was like, I want to reach out to this person that I've never ever had any contact with. And I sent them a message, and they replied to me within an hour.
Whoa. Yeah,
which I didn't expect. And then they're like, hey, this is actually a really interesting thought that we have never thought about. And it's not a faith-based organization, but the people in the organization have faith. And they said, we are kind of grounded in this type of thinking, but we haven't thought formally about how to do this. So this is very timely. I want you to get a hold of, and they gave me another name. So it was funny, but how like I woke up with that being on my mind. And I thought, I'm trying to learn to like take action when I have those thoughts. And so I did, and then I shot the message. They sent that reply back, and I replied back with another message. Hey, thank you for the point of contact. I've reached out to them. Trust all is well. And then they even replied back again, or like, no, thank you, Milo, again, for like this perspective. Like this is, thank you for, the phrase was, thank you for being obedient to what God put upon your heart. Which I think it leads us to this conversation we're having about stewardship. How do we steward these moments that we are trying to discern what God wants us to do?
Yeah.
How do we step into the thing that God has for us? Because when I woke up with that thought, I thought, I don't know this person. They don't know me. I just know the public facing side of who they are. And I don't, I have no reason to think that they would ever see my message or read it,
right?
Let alone take the time to reply to it. Like at minimum, maybe I thought an assistant would get back to me.
Yeah.
But I was like, so I'm rather astonished at how that played out. But I don't care if I moved the ball forward with the idea or helped them at all with that, as much as it was, I felt my responsibility was to deliver the mail. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
On what the idea was. So with that in mind, last week we talked about stewardship.
Yeah.
And the principle of stewardship. And we looked at a parable Jesus told about 3 guys. One was given by their master. One was given 5 talents. One was given 2. One was given 1. The guys with the 5 and 2 talents were able to double it. And the one with the 1 talent went in the backyard, dug a hole, buried it. And, you know, in the story of like that Jesus tells us, like, to whom much is given, much will be required. Yeah. That we are all given something that the Lord expects us to use for his kingdom purposes. Like, that is to be the focus and effort of our lives. And so we've been talking about, we're going to look at some other episodes where we're going to kind of unfold this into different dynamics of our life. But today we're going to talk about the role of money.
Yes.
Now you've sort of, this is on your heart to do this series.
Yes.
So why is that?
So,
and particularly with money, because I think the money one was the kind of the first one you wanted to tackle.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, it could also apply to other things. So why?
Why money?
Yeah.
Well, stewardship as a whole, this is, I mean, I mentioned this on the last episode when we were talking about stewardship. And I briefly mentioned that this is the first season of life that I kind of know what I'm going to anticipate for the next couple seasons of my life with going into college, and that's like it. So this year is like, one of my words is stewardship. Like, what are the things that the Lord wants me to just pour into of things that I already have versus anticipating the next thing and using my time and energy to plan that. And that also came along with another episode we did with finishing things. And stewardship is definitely the process of finishing something rather than like starting a thought. It's like a thought that's already occurred and you've already invested in. So with money, when I first approached that, I'm like, I don't want this to be like a Dave Ramsey, like, we're going to start budgeting and we're going to start small and we're going to do baby steps. Like, that's not, that wasn't my focus.
Yeah. We'll let Dave Ramsey cover down on that.
Right. But you totally see Jesus say throughout scripture,
yeah,
money is such a crucial element to like humankind, like throughout all of the centuries.
Sure.
And that was like a huge issue, was either like God or money. And like, that's like what, once you start stewarding your money, you'll start stewarding other things.
Yeah.
And it will just kind of like fall into place per se. But money is such like I've felt this at times where it's like, I earned this money. I worked X amount of hours and this is what I knew. This is what I anticipated on getting. That's what I got. And with taxes, like, you just think it's yours. Mm-hmm. Because you earned it. And we live in that kind of mindset of, you know, I worked for it, it's mine, I can do with it as I please. Mm-hmm. But the scriptures, it's like, that's God's money. Like, if you
well, the parable,
right,
that we looked at last week, the master doesn't give them like a paycheck.
Right.
He gives them something to steward.
Yes.
Like, he's still the master.
Mm-hmm.
They are a servant with the resource.
Yes.
Which is a huge perspective that we need to have. So last week we talked about a couple things on how some initial steps to live a life of effective stewardship.
Correct.
So we talked about, and we're not going to go into these details. Obviously, you can go back and listen to episode 51 and, hear that. But just to kind of put it in context, what we're going to cover today, we said you got to commit to your role as a steward, right? So I have to view myself as that.
A steward.
Second, I need to develop a maximized mentality. Mm-hmm. So I need to be, how can all of these resources be used to their maximum potential? And then third, I have to be prepared to give an accounting for my actions, because there's an accounting that takes place at the end of the parable.
Yes.
And what's helped me, so when your mom and I got married in 1998, we were not bad with money. Like, your mom had a little bit of school debt, but that was all the debt we had when we got married. But we didn't have access to a ton of resources. So I was working at a ministry in the hills of Appalachia, Kentucky. It was WMTC Radio. And the way things were structured out there, I was doing this ministry as almost as like a missionary, to where I had to receive additional support from other folks to be able to
do that,
pay the bills. Now they covered my housing expenses. They covered about 70% of my food. So there was some resources they had. The radio station had a car that I could use if I needed to run into town to grab something. So it wasn't like I had to, those are significant expenses, right? So I didn't have those expenses, but I didn't get much of a pay. I think it was like $10 a month I got paid. And so I had to pick up oddball jobs and things like that. And so when your mom and I got married, that's what I was doing. But a few months after we got married, I took my first church, which was up in north central Ohio. And so here we are at the small church. Again, a parsonage was provided to us, which was fantastic. It was a nice house. And then they, I was paid weekly, which was like way more than obviously $10 a month.
Right.
But it wasn't like we had all the money in the world, right? We still had your mom's debt that we had to pay off. There were still bills that needed to get. We had to have we had a car that ended up breaking down on us, and so there was these expenses that we had. And so in that context of all of that, we were like, okay, we need to get on a budget. But we didn't really know how to do that very well. At the time, there was a organization we followed called Crown Financial Ministries, and they're still around today. And it's very much like in an accounting, like left side of the brain, logical way of handling your finances. We even went to a seminar at a friend of ours church to go through like a day seminar of like how to order your finances. And it was fantastic. In fact, there's a lot of stuff we got out of that. So like one of the things was a sheet of paper where it was that when different items go on sale throughout the course of a year. So like, when do washer and dryers go on sale? Because the new model's about to come out. And so they got to clearance out the old one. So when do they put the old one? When do they offer deep discounts on the old one? Because they got to make room for the new one. So it kind of gave you that sort of market perspective of when different items go on sale so that you can kind of go like, oh, well, if we want to get a new washer and dryer, we should look at, I don't remember what month it was, but let's say we should look for those in March, right? So we can anticipate. So you save up your money. Okay, that's a very logical thing to do. Yeah. And then around the time somebody we met introduced us to this book that had recently come out called Financial Peace. And this was in 1999 that we read the book. And it totally blew my mind because it was presenting that finances is usually not a logical decision. It's an emotional decision. So when you go to pay that water bill, you're either happy it's less than what you thought, or you're sad or frustrated that you used that much water, right? Or your electric bill, or why I didn't know we spent that much money on
X amount of
whatever, eating out or at the movies or that excursion or whatever it was. And so I thought that was really good because it sort of said there's a both and here, that you have to think logically about these things, but there's an emotional aspect to these things. And I think it's important when we talk about stewardship to recognize that both need to be at play in our life. Yeah. That there's this logical and there's this emotional dynamic that is at play as we consider these things. And so with that said, we're going to look at our key text for today, which comes from the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 through 24. You want to read that for us? Okay.
Like he said, Matthew 6, verses 19 through 24 says, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in or steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If the light in you is darkness, how great is the darkness? Now no one can serve two masters, for either you will hate the one or love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money."
It's a great passage. So we're not going to dive into this in a super detail because we just, we don't want this to be a 8-hour podcast. But what I see here, what I find interesting is Jesus lays out this logical and emotional piece.
Yes.
Right? So he's kind of the logical piece is like, don't be so focused on the temporal. What's temporal, Lord? What do you mean by temporal? Well, can it get destroyed? Can it rust? Can thieves steal it? Can the moths get after it? Yes. Okay, that's what I mean by temporal, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, what do you mean by eternal? Well, the things of eternal consequence, right? Where your heart is, like where your heart is, that's where your treasure is going to be. Okay, that sounds very reasonable and logical. But then he shifts to this like love and hate language. That's emotional language.
Yeah.
And so there's this, when Christ approaches this topic, he's recognizing that these are emotional things to us. And so we very much recognize that as we go through this. Some people are going to go, they're talking about money, I have none, click. Right? Or they're talking about money, they don't know my circumstances, they don't know my situation, I have these reasons of justification. Or like, oh, I'm fine. We're in good shape. I got more money than I know what to do with. If that's your case, I'm going to make sure you have our email address.
I'm just kidding. He's joking.
Kind of.
Okay.
But not really.
It's go to our GoFundMe. Just kidding. We don't have that.
But what we want to kind of do is narrow the focus and go like, listen, whether you have a nickel or $10 million or $10 billion, right? Or whatever it is. There's a posture towards your resources that needs to be healthy. And so we're going to kind of walk through some observations we have about this text and some things. But you want to kind of read that sort of what our big idea is that we're looking at today?
So what you watch shapes your desires, which then narrows your focus and sets the priorities that produce your current lifestyle.
Yeah.
It's a lot of words, but we're going to break it down into each
we're going to break
section.
that down. So what you watch shapes your desires. Okay, that's kind of one thing, right? Which narrows your focus. Okay, that's another thing, and sets the priorities that produce your current lifestyle. Or produce the way you're stewarding, right? Okay, so let's talk about this first thing. What you watch impacts what you desire.
No, yeah. I'll give you an example. I love clothes. I love shopping. If you looked in my closet right now, it's full, and I'd open it and be like, I have nothing to wear. And when I'm on like Instagram Reels, like there'll be ads that pop up.
Yeah.
Now it knows I love clothes.
Yes,
and
it does.
it's like those ads, and there's the model like wearing the clothes, and it's like has the link to the thing that they're presenting. And then you click it, and it's like, whoa. Like this summer, we're going to do a family vacation, and now my algorithms know I'm going on this family vacation, and there was this really pretty like beach dress thing going on, and I was like, oh my gosh, that would be so pretty. Hit it, and I'm like, it's only $40, and I had to like stop myself, and I was just like, you know what, tomorrow's a new day. Like, I don't think this is going to change my life dramatically.
Yeah. Well, and what's fascinating is, I mean, we're living in a time where the level of target of those ads is rather significant. Like, so we live in Virginia, but I go to school in North Carolina, right? So I drive down to North Carolina once a week. And this last week, now I don't live in North Carolina, but a week and a half ago, I was down there for some classes. And while I was down there, our HVAC unit was struggling up here in Virginia because it got really cold and I wasn't sure what was wrong. So, you and your mom wake up in the house and it's like 50.
We go downstairs. It's like 55 degrees.
Yeah, it's super cold. So I call some guys I know. And I'm working that out. And I'm doing a little bit of troubleshooting, like, okay, what could this be online? Okay, so then I launch Instagram. There was literally a reel that popped up that said, is your house cold and you live in North Carolina? you can reach us at da 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 da. And I was like, holy cow. Well, one, I don't live in North Carolina, but where did it know I was?
North Carolina.
In North Carolina. And it saw, wait, this guy's in North Carolina. He's looking for HVAC, which means he must be looking for repairs. There's somebody that paid for an advertisement for people in North Carolina who were looking for repairs when it was cold outside, and I targeted their ad towards that.
I guess crazy.
So, in fact, the other day, this is a great plug for our newsletter. We would love for you to sign up for our newsletter. Here's why. Because we're sending that out monthly now with our podcasts. So you'll get an email right into your inbox with the latest podcast information so that you can see that. Because we've been kind of leaning into Facebook and Instagram and other platforms to remind people that the podcast has come out. The other day I was on Instagram. I went through I counted 26 advertisements in a row.
Whoa.
Yeah. 26 advertisements in a row, which told me that like the people I follow, the folks that I'm interested in, like are getting buried. Why? Instagram wants to pay its bills. Instagram wants to make its money. And so my interests are going to be determined by what they think they can sell me, which shapes my focus, right? So what am I watching and how is that shaping my desire? So like I desired for you and your mom to be warm, and Instagram was like, well, then we'll show him those things, right? You desire to, look good on this family vacation we got planned. So here's this beautiful sundress that you can wear, right? We live in a world that can target us, like literally put in front of us. Most of us have a device in our pocket that is this little window into promised desire satisfaction. And so here's some questions to consider. What desires am I carrying that cultivate discontent with what I have? And then second, what desires am I carrying that cultivate trust in God? And I think it's important to kind of map that out, right? Like you just said about that sundress. Wait a minute. I could buy this for $40, but do I need that?
Or it comes into action after we start budgeting, right? And I'm like, $40 is how much I get for a full tank of gas.
Yeah.
Like if I'm on E.
Right.
So it's like gas or this dress. Like you start then getting logical with it instead of like emotional, because I had to like stop my emotional side and like crying at this dress. Like I need it. It's going to make my eyes pop out. Like it's going to be great. But I was just like, I need gas. Like, I need it. Like, I have like 40 dresses that I like. This half of them still have tags on it that's just sitting up there. Probably shouldn't have told you that.
Well, that's
more, you know.
where you're at.
That's where I'm at. But I feel like if I would have gotten the dress, I would have just been discontent because then I'm like, oh, well, $40 without shipping, and then you throw shipping in there, it's like $60.
And what do you think they would have shown you next time?
Oh, well, I'm not even joking. So it showed me the ad of this dress. Literally a week later, I go and they have the same dress but made by Temu, and I was like, it's like $6, and I'm like, I'm not.
Yeah. And then you get the dress, and here's the shoes. And get the shoes, and here's the sunglasses.
Got to get the earrings.
And here's the earrings, and here's the hats, and here's that, right? There's always another thing that can pile on to this, this kind of getting after what you're desiring, right? And so it's stepping back and going, okay, what am I carrying? What desires am I carrying that are actually cultivating discontent with what I have?
Yeah.
And versus what desires am I carrying that cultivate trust in God? And I think this is where that, in episode 50, we did the finish
what
things.
You start.
Yeah, finish what you start. What that forces us to do is it forces us to look at those things that once had a lot of desire in our life. And for whatever reason, it didn't deliver on the promise, or we got sidetracked or distracted, or we just forgot, or whatever the case may be. But it forces us to go, okay, that at one point that represented desire, and I became discontent, or I got distracted when desiring something else. So kind of it creates that kind of accountability. Okay, observation number 2. So we said what you watch shapes what you desire, and your desires determine your focus. Your desires determine your focus. So the questions with that.
Yeah, like what do my spending patterns reveal about my focus?
Mm-hmm.
And then secondly, like what could my spending powers be that narrow my focus on God's best for me?
Mm-hmm. And you're not going to know that unless you track your spending patterns. Like you just said, right?
Yeah.
You recognize, wait a minute, $40 can put gas in my tank, or it can put another dress in the closet. And so, but you were able to make that contrast because you've chosen to take an accounting of where your money's been going, what things cost, and then it's allowed you to create something to focus on, right? And you know, your mom and I, we would talk about this with you guys when you were younger, and it like helped me personally, but then as I was helping with folks, you know, kind of navigate different issues in their life, because I've done a lot of personal pastoral counseling with folks when it comes to their resources. And one of the things I would ask them is, okay, if you say yes to that, what are you saying no to?
Yeah.
A yes to this is a no to what? And the question was like, oh man, okay, if I say yes to this, what am I saying no to? So if I say yes to the dress, what am I saying no to?
Yes.
The gas in the car. Oh, okay. Well, that I have to have gas in the car, right?
Yeah.
In order to take care of your other responsibilities. So if I say yes to pick your thing, what are you choosing to say no to?
Absolutely.
And I remember distinctly, there was a time where we were pastoring that very first church, and there was a guy that kind of attended our church, and he was sort of in and out, and he was around my age, and I knew he had told me at one point in time what he made, so I knew financially we kind of made about the same amount of money, and we were driving somewhere together, and he says, "What do you got coming up?" And I said, "Oh, we're going to Oregon to visit family in a few weeks." Now I'm pastoring in Ohio. And he goes, that must be nice to be able to take big trips like that. I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, I can't afford anything like that. It's like, oh, well, I bet you could. And he goes, no, I don't make that kind of money. Now, I know what he makes. So I said, well, let me ask you this. How much, do you eat out or do you pack your lunch for work? And he goes, oh, I eat out. I said, okay, on average, how much are you spending?
A week.
Per day?
Oh, a day.
And he said, I don't know, $500 or $5 a day. You know, $3 at McDonald's. This is when you get a $3 value meal at McDonald's for $3. So this is a while ago. And he said, I don't know, $5 a day. And I was like, okay, so let's just $5 a day times 5 days is $25 a month. Or a week. And he's like, yeah. And I said, okay, how much is that a month? He said, on average, $100 a month. I said, okay, so just quick math. You're spending $1,200 a year on eating out. Now, there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But what if you chose to pack your lunch? How much more could you save? Let's say you could save a quarter of that. Right? So all of a sudden, or you could save 3/4 of that. So you're spending $400 a year packing your lunch. Okay, now you have $800. What could you do for a vacation for $800? And he goes, oh man, I don't know. I haven't thought about it. And I was like, yeah, that right there, that's 2 trips to Oregon for me, round trip. And he goes, oh, interesting. But it was a yes to McDonald's today is what?
A no to
a big trip.
Yeah.
Right? And now if you don't want to do the big trip,
by all means.
that's fine. If you want to eat out at McDonald's every day, okay. Like no judgment from me, right? As much as it is a yes to this is a no to something else. And so there are these questions of what am I saying yes to?
Yeah.
That is shaping the focus of my life. And if I don't like that focus, if I say, well, I would really like to further my education in whatever, like that's what I desire. It's like, is that actually what you desire?
Yeah.
Or have you started desiring something else? Like you desire, pick your thing.
Yeah.
Right?
That reminds me, when I was in the 6th grade, I've always been a little entrepreneur. In like elementary school, I had dog sit, pet sit. I had a restaurant for a day in our front yard. I attempted to like sell flowers. Like I always was like, how can I start something and then make a profit? So we moved to North Carolina when my dad first joined active duty. And there was this sweet little old woman, and I'd see her walk every day in front of our house. She had to be then probably late 60s, and it was this massive dog. It was a Corgi and a German Shepherd mixed together, but just imagine like a German Shepherd with like Corgi feet. Like not the size of a Corgi, the size of a German, like this massive dog. It weighed 70 pounds. And this little old lady. And one of our neighbors knew her, really good friends with her. And I left a letter, and I was like, I will dog walk for you. Because I knew she had a job, and she'd have to take her breaks and go walk her dog. So my whole like 5th and 6th grade year, like I would dog sit or dog walk this dog. And every week I made $15.
Lucky.
Yeah, lucky the dog. And every week I made $15. Now, I was so distraught that we moved to North Carolina that I was like, I'm going back to Oregon. So every $15, I'd take my tithe out, but then the rest of that was going into a little container underneath my bed, and that was going to be a plane ticket back to Oregon. So I could, one way, you know what I mean? And then I got up to like $500. Like I saved for like over a year and a half this money. And within that year and a half, we had already gone back to Oregon. So I'm like, oh, my parents got it. Like, it's fine.
We didn't leave forever?
No, not for, like, I'm never going to see my family again. But then I started cultivating this desire to play a guitar and to have a guitar of my own. Now, for my 9th birthday, you guys had given me a guitar, but it was like a full size.
Too big, yeah.
And I started taking lessons, and my guitar teacher was like, you need something smaller. So I got a 3/4 size inch, and that's like that desire that I had to play, that's like what I used my money for, and I still had like $200 left. But then because of that, I was able to have these long-term investments because I've been in so many different opportunities, from playing in worship to doing small groups to doing the youth group band, and I still have it's right behind me.
Yeah,
this
it's
guitar
hanging on the wall right behind me.
That one investment, like now, like I can still use.
Yeah.
So anyway, like that was my focus.
Well, and I think, and that's a great story, because what you were focused on allowed you to build up these resources that then you were able to shift to something else.
Yes.
Right? That was a good next thing for you. Okay. Observation 3.
Yes. Your focus sets the priorities that produce your lifestyle. So the question around that would be, well, several questions, would be like, what lifestyle is God wanting me to embrace? Mm-hmm. And then what choices do I need to make to embrace that lifestyle?
And those choices are, so I drew this from a book called Blue Ocean Strategy, and that I read some chapters out of recently. And in it, the book talks about there's always things that you got to start doing, stop doing, do more of, and do less of. Oh. And so there's some things that just, if they're immoral, you need to stop them, right? If they're evil, if they're sinful, like confess those sins, repent of them, turn from your wicked ways. Jesus wants to redeem you, right? He wants to forgive you. He's ready to pour out his grace upon your life. Okay, there's that stuff. There's things you need to start doing, like that are good habits and good for your soul, and
disciplines,
and good for your relationships. And there's those things. And I think sometimes that's usually where we go, oh, what do I got to stop doing? What do I need to start doing? But then there's this nuanced piece of, what do I need to do more of? That I need to create more space for? Yeah. And then what do I need to do less of? And so, for example, there was recently, and I only share this for illustrative purposes, but there is there's some missionaries that we support. And the support that we provide is like set to auto. It just goes out automatically. And we've been supporting these folks for 15, 20 years, right? We all started kind of off in ministry around the same time with one another. So we count them as good friends, super proud of the work they're doing and the impact they're having in other parts of the world. So we've been financially supporting them. And for whatever reason, that support, something got broke between the organization and our account, to where they quit receiving our funds. Oh. And I wasn't tracking that for like 3 or 4 months. Now, I could see that in that category in our budget, those finances were building. I was like, oh, I wonder what happened. And every month I would like forget to double check. And then I got an email one day like, hey, by the way, this broke. So your giving hasn't gone through. So here's my point. I had already saved up all the money, right? So it was like, oh, easy day. We can send that check. Not a problem. But what I realized was we are in a place now we can increase our capacity to give to them. So we can do more than what we were doing in the past. And sort of, in some ways, that kind of break allowed us to sort of step back and evaluate. And I went to your mom and was like, hey, here's what happened. I'm going to pump up our giving to that. Are you good with that? She's like, your mom's usually like, sure, she'd give everything away, except her winter Christmas dishes. That's very important to her.
That's like her, and ornaments.
and ornaments.
Those are sensitive.
Yeah. But she, like, your mom's a very generous person. So she was like, yeah, that's great. If we can do it, we can do it. And we can do it. So my point is there needs to be these moments in our lives where we look and go like, okay, what can I do more of now?
Yeah.
And then what should I be doing less of? Just because I have more resources doesn't mean everything else gets to grow, right? I can kind of reduce maybe my lifestyle in some places so I can be more focused with my efforts, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so observation, or did you want to share something?
Well, yeah, let's just go back to the first point.
Oh, okay.
What lifestyle is God wanting me to embrace? And I think for all of us, like, God wants us to embrace a servant's heart.
Sure, yeah.
Like in the scripture we read, like, you cannot serve both God and money. Serve. Like, we are servants. We are not masters. God did not design us to be masters. He designed us to be stewards. And I was listening to this podcast, and there was this guy, and he was trying to grasp the concept of stewardship from this other host. And he was like, do you just ask God every month, every time you get your paycheck or your salary, that you just ask God, like, how much you're going to give him? And he's like, that's interesting, like, language right there. Because he's like, the Lord has positioned me in areas and jobs and in organizations where I can make what I make. So the Lord's going to put things in our lives that we're called to steward. So he goes, the question isn't how much do I give to God? It's how much is God allowing me to keep? Because all of this money has a place to go. It has a, like we're pipes, right? Pipes versus pails. We talked about that a while ago. And these have, like, places to go. So, like, Lord, like, what can I keep? Because we are servants of him. And anyway, like,
which is a perspective shift, right?
Yes.
That's a question of focus.
And it causes you to be intentional with who am I and who is he?
Yeah.
He is my master. Or money is my master. I remember talking to you on Tuesday, and I was developing some notes, which were kind of going south. And you said something that, like, just stuck. And if you are a slave to money, you can't steward it.
Yeah.
It's only when you are a slave to God and a servant of God, then can you steward appropriately the things he's asking you to steward. So the idea that we're talking about is, like, stewardship. So that is with the mentality that you are a child of God and you are a servant of him, not money.
Yeah.
So anyway.
I mean, we could go down a rabbit hole because anyway, which we don't have time to do.
Anyway.
But I think that's a really valid point. And one thing I want to guard people away from thinking is, like, well, I'll deal with that when I have more. And which is, like, that's a lie.
That's a fake promise or a false promise, because you'll just find another thing. I need a new phone. It's like, okay, well, you didn't need a new phone yesterday.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay, observation number 4. Your lifestyle is sustained by the stewardship you daily practice.
So the questions are, like, what channels of content cultivate biblical stewardships, and then what channels of content cultivate impulse spending?
And I'm specifically thinking of social media platforms. Mm-hmm. Because I think that is probably one of the most pernicious ways that we are getting sucked in these days to poorly spend our resources.
Yeah.
Whether pick your platform, it doesn't matter. But every place we get content is trying to sell us something.
Yeah.
It's trying to upsell us on something. And I think there's like a really practical step is to step back and go, okay, where am I getting my content? And what is that cultivating within me? I mean, and that's not necessarily like some of it is like, they're not bad things in and of themselves. It's like, there's when I type in a Bible verse, there's some Bible websites that pop up. How is that website supported? By ads. And so here I am trying to read a passage of scripture online, and I'm, like
bombarded.
Buy this thing today, sponsor this cause today, do this, that, and the other. And it's all like fine stuff. It's not immoral things, but it's sort of like you kind of got to wade through that. And I think there's a value in sort of stepping back and going, what if I dialed down, or what if I became more mindful of the channels of content in my life that are either cultivating biblical stewardship or they're cultivating impulse spending.
Yeah.
And so if I have a problem spending money on Instagram, what if I gave Instagram up? And I know some folks, or TikTok, or I don't know, Snapchat, or whatever else is out there, whatever else people are on. Like, what if I quit doing that? And I know there's some people like, well, I can't quit doing that, which is like, why the emotional response? Where is that emotional response coming from? Because if we were to just logically talk through this, I guarantee most folks would go like, that makes sense. But emotionally, and some of it has to do with the way we're rewiring our brains, because of the brain chemistry that these social medias have learned how to leverage, the endorphins that are fired off with the doom scrolling, that is so easy to slip into. But what if I step back and go like, okay, what tomorrow or the rest of today, maybe that's a better thing. The rest of today, how could I change the channels of the content that I'm consuming? And I'm only going to focus on those things. Or I'm only going to focus on those things for a limited period of time that help me cultivate the biblical stewardship God expects of me.
Yeah. And to go back to the observation, it says your lifestyle is sustained by the stewardship you practice daily. That like takes me back to one of the things. Well, okay. Over break, we just had winter break. And my brother, love my brother, his birthday is the day after Christmas. He just turned 21. We were at the table. And we were going around saying like words of advice. And Dad said, you need to ask God daily what like the big stones are and the little stones are. Like, what are the big things you need to, like, you're asking of God? Like, what's he laying on your heart? Like, the big things that you have to do first. Like, I know I have to get gas. Like, today I'm on E. Gotta get gas. Like, I can't wait for tomorrow. Like, that's a big thing. Another one, gotta do my devos. Like, there's an order to which you should live your life daily. And those are the practices that allow you to steward the things that God's asking you to steward. Versus it's like, oh, today, like I got Thursdays are my paycheck days. So it's like I get super excited for Thursdays. But like I have to ask God, okay, Lord, what are the big things I have to do today? Oh, homework. Like that's big. Before I go on Amazon or before I go on Altered State or before I go on American Eagle, like let me put those little things away so I can focus on the things that God's asking me to steward right now.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
All right. If this is some folks may be going like, oh, I got more questions than answers right now. Like how are you guys organizing your finances? What book was that you talked about reading? What would you do if, like, feel free to reach out to us. You can reach me on X or Instagram or Facebook. You can DM me there. You can email us, hello@thisresilientsoul.com. You can find Olivia
on Instagram at olivia.grace_28 or at Facebook, Olivia Curtis.
We'd love for you to share, follow, rate, review this podcast.
Absolutely.
I was talking to somebody today. They called me up and they had a question about the podcast. And so I was backfilling them on some stuff. And I was like, you've been listening? They're like, yeah, I'm all caught up. I got one more to listen to. And I was like, great. Have you reviewed the podcast? And they're like, no. I'm like, could you do that? They're like, absolutely. So if that's you, if you're like, I'd love to do that, or like, there's no reason why I wouldn't do that, man, we'd love for you to be able to do that for us. Also share this. There may be somebody that you would, maybe like a significant other or good friend, and we're like, hey, I want to have more conversations about this. I need some accountability. Because of the focus of my life. It's not where it ought to be. I'm not practicing the stewardship, or I want to be better. This is something we can always be better at, right? We can always grow in. There's not really a ceiling to this in our lives. Feel free to share that. We invite you to share that. We welcome it. And feel free, like I said, feel free to reach out to us. We got a ton of resources that I can point you in the direction of the accounting or budgeting software and books and all kinds of stuff that can help you gain the traction in your life we want you to have. So thank you all for listening today. We trust you're doing well, and
have a great week.